Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. It's a war with no end in sight. For 8 years, Syrians have been suffering under the brutal onslaught of the Assad regime. And with hundreds of thousands dead and millions displaced, the world is searching for a way out. At the latest Syria summit in Ankara, the leaders of Turkey, Russia and Iran agreed that a political solution was the only way to stop the bloodshed. And a key component to that will be forming a constitutional committee whose details were agreed upon by the three leaders. Made up of pro-government, opposition and independent members, the committee will be tasked with writing Syria's new constitution. But previous calls for a political solution have been met with more bombings and renewed offensives by the regime. No place has seen this more than Idlib, which continues to be plagued by violence despite a ceasefire being agreed to in late August. So, will the creation of a constitutional committee actually change the situation on the ground? Will they be able to write a constitution that can bring together warring sides that have been fighting for 8 years? And to answer that, joining me now is Andrej Krickovic, who is an associate professor at HSE University in Moscow, and Talip Kucukcan, who is a former Turkish MP and a senior fellow at TRT World Research Center. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. Andrej, thanks for flying in. So the leaders of Turkey, Russia and Iran met for the 5th Trilateral Summit on Syria. And decisions made on the situation in Idlib and the formation of the Constitutional Committee signal a new phase for Syria's future. Andrej, I want to start with you. How significant was this summit when compared to the previous ones?
Well, I mean, it's a good thing that they're keeping the talk, but not much was really accomplished, I would say. Kicking the can down the road seems to be kind of what they're doing, but keeping communication open is important. But we can see that not really much of a resolution was agreed to here, that the statements following the summit really kind of reiterated what the positions have been before.
But this is the first time the leaders actually announced the formation of this constitutional committee. Isn't it significant?
In itself, yes, but we still have to see how this kind of plays itself out. I mean, I'm not trying to denigrate the entire process, but I'm also not too optimistic, to be honest with you.
Okay, so Talip, what do you make of this? Do you believe this formation of this constitutional committee will change something on the ground after 8 years of fighting?
I think that's an important step. I a little bit disagree with Andrej, because all leaders talked about political solutions, urgency of political solutions. Before that, we have looked at mostly security issues, okay, and migration, refugees, etc., etc., and defense issues. But now, for the first time, three leaders agreed that some kind of political process should be launched. I think at the basis of this, the Constitutional Commission is important because the names, etc., mandate were agreed upon. I think if this is given an international support in the Geneva or in other formats, I think that is an important step. It's not only that. I think three leaders have also said that territorial integrity of Syria is extremely important. I think this is a very strong statement.
But they've been repeating that.
Yes, but the non-state actors in the Syrian context, they are getting more and more power, and the Damascus is becoming less and less influential. So that is a threat for the region, that smaller states might appear, failed states might emerge in the region. That is an existential threat for the regional powers, especially for Turkey, Iraq, Lebanon, and Jordan.
So this committee will be comprised of pro-regime members, opposition, and the NGO. So what does this tell about us? I mean, that Assad's removal from power is not a prerequisite anymore?
It hasn't been for Russia, actually. So, I mean, it hasn't been something that Russia has been pushing. Assad can go, he can stay. What's important is that there's some kind of process that involves the Syrian people that's legitimate and it adheres to international law. So the misconception with Russia is that they're somehow wedded to Assad, but they really aren't. What's important for Russia is that they have a legitimate resolution to the Syrian crisis.
So Talip, from Turkey's perspective and Western powers' perspective, will this legitimize the regime?
I think Turkey has argued for many years since the start that the future of Syria will be decided by the people of Syria, not by foreign powers. The foreign powers or foreign, let's say, actors should facilitate this kind of resolution. But we have to be realistic as well. We are talking about a regime which has caused a havoc in the country, and millions of people were displaced, and thousands of people were killed. And how realistic it will be that a regime that many people hold responsible for this kind of results might remain. So for the Turkish, I think, political elite, Assad has lost its legitimacy in its own country. However, of course, I think if there is a consensus, which is quite difficult, whether Assad will remain in power or not, I think it will be, again, the decision of the Syrian people.
We'll see that in the future.
It is very, I think, early to say something about it. But from the beginning, I think the Turkish side thinks that Assad lost his legitimacy as a political leader in the country.
On the other hand, all leaders agreed that an action should be taken on Idlib as soon as possible, but they didn't tell what it is. So, Andrej, what's at stake in the region?
Well, I mean, that's precisely at stake, is that the security situation is up in the air. It's getting worse. There are so many factors, and from the Israeli elections, how they'll play themselves out, to what's going on with Iran and the United States. Is Iran now taking a tougher line? How will they, influence Assad? So, with my colleague, I agree that this constitutional committee being, going forward is a very big step. But without the security fundamentals there, and with the security situation, we didn't really hear much about how this situation will, solve itself. There's only so much pushing you can go. Aleppo created Idlib, and now what's after Idlib? I mean, is this going to spill over into Turkey? And then what's next after that? So
will this ceasefire hold this time?
Well, it's a $1 million question, right? It's a very tough question. It's one that has so many moving parts. So for Russia, it's very important that they don't want to see a bloodbath. They don't necessarily even want to see Assad win, but they can't have these, from their point of view, Salafist, jihadist extremists, using this as a safe zone to launch attacks. So can Turkey do what, from the Russian perspective, is their job of weeding those out, those elements, and getting rid of those elements? Can Russia restrain Assad? That's what their job is.
Yeah, in the meantime, can Russia restrain Assad?
Well, I mean, it's not just
because
Russia.
Because maybe Assad is thinking he's winning.
He's thinking he's winning, and also, he's backing, Russia in the air and Iran on the ground. And what's the Iran end game now? I mean, we don't know what happened with Saudi Arabia, the attack on the oil infrastructure. Maybe this is, maybe it's the Houthis, but maybe it's also, this, backed by the Iranians to, force some kind of resolution to their own problems with the sanctions and with the United States. So if you have a much more aggressive stance by Iran, this also could play itself.
So Talip, what do you think will happen in Idlib?
I think in the situation in Idlib is about to blow up, and this is a cause of concern mostly for Turkey, because people who would run away from the Idlib crisis will end up near Turkey's border. That's why Turkey, I think, has emphasized this in the summit meeting, that there must be some kind of solution in Idlib. Otherwise, the consequences will not only influence Turkey. So, and President Erdogan has said that if there is a flow of people, hundreds and thousands of people, Turkey will not be able to shoulder this responsibility on its own this time. So
Turkey's concerns have not been met at this summit?
I think the leaders acknowledged that Turkey has the right to defend itself if there's something coming from there.
But there's also the risk of millions of people flocking to Turkey's border.
I think that is still, there is a limbo in there. I think there hasn't been any very concrete steps taken, because we are talking about not only Turkey, Russia, but also Iran, and also maybe some other actors. Therefore, there is a very complicated situation in Idlib, and if that continues in the same direction, I think there will be a lot of troubles in that region.
All right, we talked about the situation in Idlib and how will this new committee work under the current circumstances. Now let's move to the northeastern parts of Syria, where Turkey wants to set up a safe zone for the return of Syrian refugees. On the other hand, all we know that Turkey and the United States are still trying to iron out their differences over Syria. And while they've agreed to a safe zone, the central issue remains that the U.S. supports the YPG terror group despite Turkish opposition.